この床の間で傾く床を移動しながら10分以内に3つのドーンでクイズに正解せよ。全てクリアすると最後の難関に挑戦できるが、
My history with R.E.M. I guess it started in high school. The memory I have is my junior year of high school, driving my 67 VW Bug and hearing The One I Love on Tampa's rock station, Z93. I have heavy associations with that song in that car. In fact, I think the only song that has a stronger association with my old VW is, you remember Get It On? The blatant Kashmir ripoff by Kingdom Come? I liked The One I Love. The guitar part was mostly played on open string, so it made me feel pretty great that I could play it reasonably well. That same year, 1987, was also the year of this issue of Rolling Stone. It was their 20th anniversary issue, and they used it to compile a list of the 100 best albums of the last 20 years. This list pretty much changed my life. I don't think I'm being hyperbolic. I was cocky about music at 17. I grew up in a musical household. I was listening to things that nobody at school had even heard of. It sure seemed to me that I knew a lot about music. This list made it clear how little I knew. It was from this list that I was introduced to Richard and Linda Thompson, Captain Beefheart, Patti Smith, Television, The Modern Lovers, The Velvet Underground. For the next about 5 years or so, I used this list as a guide for most of my record buying. And one of the first albums I bought because of this list was R.E.M's Murmur. I played it a ton. I really came to love it. Then I moved off to college, and my thoughts about alternative music grew a lot more intransigent. And for more of that discussion, check out my video on Joy Division's Unknown Pleasures. Also, at that time, it started occurring to me that R.E.M. was growing much more mainstream, but their music was growing less interesting. Murmur did some musical things with strange chord voicings, with bass lines that were so melodic that they basically walked sometimes, arrangements that were sparse and dry but without sounding dumbed down or amateurish. So, yes, it was interesting musically, and behind all the musical interestingness was this singer guy mumbling in the background. That's how I ingested it. I know I say this a lot, but it's worth repeating here. When I listen to music, 90 to 95% of my attention is on the instrumental parts, and only about 5 to 10% on the vocalist. And honestly, most of that 5 to 10% is analyzing the melody. Lyrics are rarely a concern for me. Unless they are brilliant, honestly, I feel they're unnecessary. And R.E.M. is actually a great example of this tendency I have. I got my first cassette copy of Murmur in 1988. I listened to it probably 50 times or more that year, and another 100 times since then. But if you ask me to give you the words to any of the 12 songs on this album, well, what could I come up with? Something, transit, catapult, call me in. Yeah, I think that's about it. So it's true that my initial fondness for R.E.M. waned and then died altogether once it seemed to me that they were becoming more accessible and less musically interesting. But it's also true to say that of the writers and poets I've met in my life, pretty much all of them are fans of R.E.M. This includes Emily. She's definitely a fan. I know that there are some songs that are meaningful for her, and I know it must be frustrating for her to feel like my musical judgmental attitudes have kept her from sharing some of this with me. She even tried one time. It was over a long weekend at home. When Emily and I have time together with no expectations and no structure to our time, we both tend to free associate around each other. One of us will start a movie or a video game or an album. The other will sit close and participate. Things will kind of follow a rabbit trail of discussions of art, more music. Maybe we'll record something. Maybe we'll make something. Maybe we'll sit and talk for an hour. I love this time with Emily. On the weekend in question, it was getting late, and we'd had a day of much interaction with each other, as well as a bit of vodka and a bit of cognac. She tried to get me to hear the album Automatic for the People, especially the song Night Swimming. I told her that the song's changes made me angry. I got worked up about how pretentious I thought their musical choices were in that song. She patiently smiled at me and said, "Careful, Vayler." I saw I was dangerously close to really hurting her feelings. So I dropped it, and we haven't revisited it since. So it looks like this week is going to require not only trying to hear with new ears, but also drop my own ego, and probably some harmful prejudices as well. I should be able to do that. I hope. See, something in the back of my brain is telling me that at least part of my feelings about R.E.M. comes from lingering misplaced hipsterism, or maybe just contrarianism. There might even be some latent sexism happening here, as I have an association in my brain that most of the people I know who are R.E.M. fans are also women. And I'm not sure why I have that filed away. But that sure feels like a damn good reason to pull out my feelings on R.E.M. and try to unknot them. So why Green specifically? Green seems to me, anyway, to be the album that straddles the older, folky, jangly, musically interesting R.E.M. and the newer, poppier, mandolinier R.E.M. Okay, it's time. Let's see if digging into this transitional album will somehow help me get on board enough to somehow make shiny, happy people seem listenable. First thing I noticed was I knew a lot of these songs already. Pop Song 89, Get Up, Stand, Orange Crush, those were all familiar. The next thing I noticed was that I seemed to like the ones I had never heard before a lot better than the hits. Maybe this album will end up being like Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms for me, where the best songs are not the hits like Walk of Life, Money for Nothing, but instead the deeper cuts like Your Latest Trick or The Man's Too Strong. I ended up spending probably about 30 minutes on Pop Song 89 trying to figure out why that riff in the verses sounds so at right angles to the rest of the music, to the changes. I thought surely it must be more than just the fact that it's a minor riff against a major key. Well, after charting the whole thing out and analyzing the notes one by one in context, it turns out it's just because it's a minor riff against a major key. Get Up. I like the intro. I like the chorus. I like the interlude with the music boxes. I don't much like the get up verses as much. That seems a little silly. You Are the Everything. The sound has elements of the band, elements of Led Zeppelin, and the choice to have the bass stay on an ostinato against the 4-to-1 changes, I think that works. And if you don't know the term ostinato, what it basically means is that you have a repeated figure, usually a bass line, that stays constant while the rest of the music changes. So if we had just a simple bass line, that's in the key of A, obviously, but as we make changes, that's what ostinato is. World Leader Pretend sounds a lot like the earlier R.E.M., except for the pedal steel and the castanets. Interesting choices. Turn You Inside Out. I have a problem with this one a bit. Maybe it's the overuse of the weird little vocal thing he does during the chorus, but it kind of rubs me the wrong way. Hair Shirt feels like Are You the Everything Part 2. I still think I like it okay. The changes go in interesting directions. The riff in I Remember California, it's dark and dirgy. I like that riff. The rest of the song is kind of samey though. The last track, Untitled. There's something I like about it. It's the fact that they start with just the drums, and you think at first there's a rushed snare every bar until you hear it in context. That kind of rhythmic illusion thing I think is pretty clever. The weird little instrumental choruses in it, though, are kind of silly. To me, anyway. And as I'm listening to this for the first couple of times, I think I might have hit on something fundamental about a good portion of this album, but I need to play it a few more times and find out if it checks out. If they're doing what I think they're doing, then I think I still might have a hang-up. Let me check this out. Yeah, I think I was kind of right. Let me show you an example of what I'm seeing here. As a warning, though, some of what I'm about to say might spoil R.E.M's music for you, maybe a bit, or maybe I just have too high an opinion of myself. So here's what I see. Start with a block of text. For this example, it doesn't matter what it is. I'll use a paragraph from a recent email I sent to Astrid. Next thing you'll need is a relatively simple set of chord changes, something in a major key, but maybe one chord that adds a couple of notes outside of the scale. Now all we have to do is use the first 4 notes of the major scale to improvise a simple melody over the changes, adding our text on the way. When you start a new project and import it, set the click to quarter equals 153. There should be 1 bar of silence followed by the 4 drumstick clicks. Once my brain made that association, that's all I'm hearing for about half this album. It's kind of like when you first discover that all of Emily Dickinson's poems can be sung to the tune of Yellow Rose of Texas. And maybe that might be okay if the lyrics held up, but sometimes they do, and sometimes... Look, when Michael Stipe's lyrics are good on this album, they do the same kind of impressionistic, paint the edges kind of thing that much of Trout Mask Replica does, and I like that. I don't know they always hit that mark, though. Musically, it seems like the band is making a conscious effort to make the songs tighter and more accessible. But to me, they really lose the things that make their music interesting. By polishing out the weirdness, they've made themselves more ordinary, it seems to me. Well, the good news in all of this is I think I was successful in getting over some of my preconceptions. I feel differently about this music now compared to how I thought I might. I thoroughly enjoyed a couple of these songs and partially enjoyed most of the others. But at the core it feels to me as if they're compromising aspects of their voice to try to reach more people. The mandolin and accordion, etc., etc., etc.